TID board to order and ask you to stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. With no public present, I'll dispense with introductions and with public comment and move to item 3 on our agenda for the approval of our minutes from our January board meeting. I've had a chance to review those or suggest any modifications. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Yes.
I'd entertain a motion to approve the January minutes.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Board member reports. I'd start off that just to share with you some concerns over legislation and world events that affect the transportation industry and affect funding for transportation. There is a bill moving through the legislature to repeal the most recent increase in the state gasoline tax as a in recognition of the increased funding available at the state level through the federal transportation bill that was passed earlier this year. And so that's a bad idea. The local governments that receive gas tax don't automatically get a distribution of the federal tax, as those monies come to us in a competitive nature and in a structured nature. And so the idea that it would find that money finds its way to the local government to backfill our gas tax is just a fallacy. It's important to note when you look at that bill what time of year it is and what year it is in terms of elections coming up, and I think there's a suspicion that this is more politically motivated than rationally motivated, but nevertheless that's being proposed. There's also in the discussion of oil and oil prices and the source of oil purchases related to Russia and the Ukraine conflict, that we've cut off purchases of Russian oil, and in the context of that, there's discussion being offered about repealing the federal gasoline tax during the time when these prices have spiked as high as they are. And so I had a conversation this morning with Commissioner Merrill about that, and the price of oil, obviously the price of fuel at the pump has a big impact on our economy, but turning off the spigot on transportation projects has a huge impact on our economy in terms of the economic impact of how that money's spent and the importance of transportation to our economy. And so I hope those kind of discussions are short-lived, but they are ongoing, and I'm trying to be engaged in both those discussions. Wanted to share that with you because the money that comes to us through our TID board a lot of times is contingent upon state and federal funding. The money we apply for Odot funding through the Jobs and Commerce program for TIDs certainly would be at risk if ODOT's funding got cut off at the federal level. So there are a lot of dominoes that start falling when these kind of discussions happen, and so I just wanted to let you know I'm engaged in that, and I'll keep you posted on any big developments. There may be a point where we need to reach out to the state legislature on the state gas tax issue, and to Congress on the federal issue.
Chris, do you have a sense of whether that idea of putting a furlough on the state gas tax is gonna get legs?
I've heard, this is all secondhand, I've heard the governor has said he won't support it.
All right,
But I don't think that necessarily keeps it from moving through the legislature. And there's obviously politics being played with that.
Sure.
And it's my opinion that it's more about the idea of it than it is the substantive nature of it and the timing of it with respect to elections. But that's just
all right,
my cynical opinion.
understood. I share it.
It's worth noting that the sponsor of the legislation in the House is the brother of the Senate president. So, but there hasn't, the signal is that the Senate's not necessarily supportive of it. So, but there's some interesting dynamics surrounding that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I bet.
So that's all I have to report from my standpoint on the board. Any other board members have anything to report or discuss? Hearing none, I'll ask Si to give us our Secretary Treasurer's report.
The current cash balance is $6,387,435.61. That's all I have.
Thank you, Si. Any questions for Si? Make a motion to accept the Treasurer's report.
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, our staff report. Rob, would you like to take us through your report for the month? For the last 2 months, actually, I guess.
I certainly will. Good morning, everyone. Start off with what you all know. Rick Carfagna, as you know, resigned his seat with the 68th, as the 68th District Representative in January. And so I understand there was a recent appointment.
Happens today at 1 o'clock.
Happens today, excuse me. A naming of an appointment. So. But we'll look forward to working with the new member this morning, or this in the coming weeks, and we'll want to discuss with. I'm sure have a discussion with the Speaker of the House staff regarding appointment of whoever this is to the board. So project updates. 713637 project. We're moving along, working with Odot, working with another consultant who is doing work for Odot on basically a re-analysis of the environmental document, the preliminary plan for the interchange modification, making sure that our plan jives with the kind of the re-analysis, if you will. But that work is ongoing, moving along as scheduled. Home Road and Salmon Parkway improvements. We should start to see some construction activity very quickly once the weather breaks. Shelley and Sands is the contractor, and got a lot of work to do before August. I think they'll be pushing to finish by August, but I think they can probably do it. So the traffic poles, I know those are traffic signal poles are long lead items. Those were ordered, late last fall, but what we're told is those are going to take over a year to get in. So I wouldn't expect to see traffic signal poles until maybe this fall at best. So a good indicator that the supply chain issues and that was an issue before the supply chain issues. We were at 8 or 9 months just 2 or 3 years ago, and now it's starting to push over a year. Moving on to the Odot TID grant program. You're familiar with that. We've had good success over the last few years getting Odot funds for some of our projects. ODOT has moved up the schedule of the application cycle. It used to be open in May. It is now open right now through March 31st. I believe ODOT's looking to try to get those grant awards issued closer to July than last year. I think the grant awards weren't issued until sometime in the fall. So we'll want to have more conversation on this, and this will maybe bleed over into the next item on the agenda. But we've had some discussions with the city of Delaware regarding the Salmon Parkway extension as a potential project that we could participate in as the TID. So I'll tee it up there, and we'll come back to that in just a minute if that's okay. And then the last item I had was the April board meeting. I'm not anticipating any need to have a meeting next month unless you really want to, but we can defer that or leave it on the agenda however you'd like you to, or however you'd like to handle that. The May is our annual organizational meeting where you'll name officers for the upcoming year, and so I would anticipate having that meeting. But and then not on the report, but more of an editorial comment about what Chairman Bosman just spoke about regarding the transportation funding situation. You know, inflation is a real issue now. I mean, we're all seeing it with consumer products and groceries. Construction inflation I expect to be extremely high over the next 2 to 3 years. This year, certainly. As you know, I'm telling you things I'm sure you already know, but we can't purchase our concrete or asphalt overseas. We have to produce it right here, and so we're subject to all the increases in input costs that we're suffering locally, and there's really no way around that by purchasing from other countries or anything else. Certainly with the energy prices skyrocketing, that will have a direct effect on what we pay for asphalt and concrete and all the other energy intensive road materials we use this year. And so I'm not looking forward to getting those bids in the next month or so as we bid out some county projects, but that's the reality, and it's not encouraging to hear talk of repealing funding as that increase we saw last year with the transportation bill. Now we're talking about taking that away in the midst of pretty significant inflation costs. So anyway, again, an editorial comment there, but something we all want to be aware of. And that, I believe, concludes my report, unless you had any other questions. I think maybe we can talk about Sawmill under the next item.
Any questions for Rob before we move on?
Will the pool issue cause a safety issue eventually, or we go to a, what's next? How do you handle if we don't even get them by fall?
We will just have to leave the existing traffic signal up. Normally what you do is leave the signal in place while you build the new signal. You add the poles basically behind the existing poles. So we'll be able to work around it. It'll be some inconvenience because the road work should be done by late summer, and then they'll have to come back and finish the traffic poles. But we'll do all the underground work at the intersections. So nothing we haven't done before, just more of an observation of how difficult it's become to get supplies, and supply chain issues are certainly hitting transportation as much as every other industry.
Thank you.
In all likelihood, the additional lanes that we add may end up being blocked off and restricted until the new signal head can be
That's right.
placed in. Anything else? Let's move into item 7, talk about the Odot TID grant program update. And as to use Rob's words, he teed up the Sawmill extension project with the city. And there's an exhibit, that's the last page of the packet that shows this. Rob, can you talk us through what the city's project, current project is, and then what the remainder of the project is? we should probably mention in this that the city has a user for property on the north side, I believe it's on the north side, right, of the
Yes.
Sawmill extension, that they're making this, making this roadway project investment in order to facilitate that new user. And the jobs and commerce money that our TID board can apply for is heavily leans toward job creation and economic development. And so we've selected projects in the past that have elements like that, like our home road project, home road extension project, like our Sawmill and home road project that have economic development. This project is probably the best project out in the county right now that would meet the criteria of the TID grant money. And so that's the reason we're talking about this project specifically.
So I included an article from the Delaware Gazette in your packet from, 5 or 6 weeks ago, talking about the proposed business park, which is basically an expansion of the current business park, but it encompasses 89 acres on the north side of Salmon Parkway. And so in discussions with the City of Delaware, Public Works and Engineering staff, there's a desire to fast track the Salmon Parkway extension to the west. And if you look on that map that's in your packet, that's basically the red portion, what they're calling Part 1 or Phase 1, or however you want to call it. That would provide access to the proposed 89-acre business park, and they're currently under a schedule to bid that project in May or June of this year and have that work starting hopefully by August or September of this year, potentially completing it by the time the snow flies next winter. So part of that discussion was in making sure that the alignment for the future phases to the west were consistent with our expectations at the county level. And so we have, I think, concurred with what's shown here on the map, and that has led to some more discussion about how we as the TID board could help this project. And so, as Chris mentioned, the Odot program is very much targeted towards job creation, job support, with this being, this first 1,500 feet or so being a really strong, what I think would be a strong application in terms of direct job creation, because there's basically a pad-ready site at that point. So once this road is done, I think that's a potentially good opportunity to participate in Phase 1, and I think there's some willingness from the city, and we need to firm up these commitments, but this is more for introduction and discussion to reciprocate where the city would participate on the Phase 2, advancing that maybe a little sooner than otherwise the city would. So again, some more discussion is needed, but wanted to get this in front of you for your feedback and consideration. I'll mention again, the Odot's grant program is up to $500,000 per award. I think Odot only still has $4.5 or $5.5 million per year to go around. Now there's 50 some odd TIDs in the state, 55. So it's that pool has been significantly watered down from the old days, but this is I think it would be a very strong application, and it's one step closer to getting completion over section line road. So open to any thoughts or discussion you have.
First thought I had, from, being a little bit familiar with this, doesn't that offsite, excuse me, that offsite drainage channel have to be constructed as part of the first phase?
Yes, so my understanding is the city is including that with their design.
Okay.
The quarry did build their relocate the ditch, and so everything's set up to receive it once it's built.
Okay.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
The other point I wanted to make about this is we scratch our heads to try to come up with what we think's the best project for competing for this grant money. It's not that we have an allocation from the state that we can expect to get this every year. It's not money that's in our wallet. We compete with all the other TIDs, and so we want to put together the best application, the project we think has the most funding. In this case, this is a project where I take off my county engineer hat and put on my TID board hat and say, this is the most competitive project that we can come up with in the county, I think, for this funding round. We don't have a project we're putting aside in deference to this project. So our focus has been on county projects to date, but the scope of this board is bigger than that, and I'll to be totally candid, the city didn't come to us with this. We went to the city with this idea, saying this is a good. When they told us about this project, we said this is a good candidate for us to try to get money from the state, and so. I just want to make sure you understood the context of this application and make sure you understood we're not, by taking on a project that's the city's, we're not taking money away from a county project to do this. We're simply competing for a pot of money in the state that we probably wouldn't have had a competitive application for this year.
Well, that's good. It keeps our flag raised in front of the state.
What's that?
I said it keeps our flag raised in front of the state.
I agree.
Just out of curiosity, have we been successful previously in getting grants awarded?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we got money for the extension of Home Road east of 23,
Okay.
and on a project that had commercial and residential developer participation,
Okay.
and the project that Rob briefed us on earlier at Sawmill and Home Road, with that tied to the OSU medical facility. We were able to get funding for that project. Are those the only two, Rob?
We also got funding on the North Road extension,
North Road, thank
phase
you.
1, which was tied to the new elementary school 16 in Olentangy. So, and plus connection to that kind of 23 backage road system that will help relieve traffic
Yeah.
on 23 eventually.
Mr. Chair, with the building expansion going on in Delaware and surrounding counties, both with Intel and everything else going on, the roundabout coming out of a quarry that brings in 1,500 to 2,500 six-axle trucks a day. A day.
Yep.
That roundabout's huge because there's a big safety factor there, and those trucks line up trying to get out. They wait so long, and eventually they pull out in front of somebody, just because they got to get out of the quarry. So as far as economic, helping the economic structure of what's going on around here, this project, I think, will be part of it.
I do too. So it's also important to note when you talk about the quarry, the traffic that comes in and out of the quarry comes to and from a lot of different destinations and a lot of directions, and it changes, day to day based on where the activity is. So it's not like an industry where Kroger distribution, you can say they're headed to, this many's headed to 71 and this many are headed west on 36. It's all over the place with the stone quarry. It's wherever the job is that day. And right now there's a strong movement out of the stone quarry to the south, down to the 42 section line intersection, which is not the best intersection based on the geometrics. And then south of there's a movement down smaller roads to get over to Sawmill Parkway for that traffic that's headed south. Not all the quarry traffic, but a large portion of it heading to southern Delaware County finds its way across Bunny Station Road or Clarkshaw or Beanalla or Hyatt's Road. and to get to Sawmill Parkway and Points East. So this connection for that traffic to basically be able to get on Sawmill Parkway right at the entrance to the quarry provides some pretty big relief to some of the other traffic patterns south of there on roads that really were never designed to handle the truck traffic they're getting.
Bunny Station, the 6 axles that go on
Yeah.
Bunny Station's crazy.
Yeah,
And then you add the delay, and most of those trucks, it's about $2 a minute, if not $3 a minute now.
is that
So you
right?
hold them up 5 minutes on
Yeah.
1,500 trucks, it adds up, I mean, it really does.
I just wanted to clarify your comment, Tom, that when you said that roundabout's huge, you're saying it's hugely important, not physically huge.
Well, you can't put well, excuse me, you can put anything you want, but I wouldn't want a little roundabout.
I agree with that.
It needs to be a double lane roundabout.
Yeah. Thank you. So the question before us is whether we move ahead with an application for the Odot TID grant program for the Jobs and Commerce funding for the City of Delaware Sawmill Parkway Extension Project. Is there any further discussion about that? I'd entertain a motion.
So move.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. In terms of new project discussion, we touched on this in our January meeting about the scope of our board could be changing, and our focus could change as we move forward. We're collecting an administrative fee on projects, and we get an allocation annually from the Board of Commissioners that we spend on projects. But slowly, over time, the balance in our funds builds to the point where we may be able to start thinking about advancing some projects strictly as TID funded projects, not as a partner on other funding specifically. And so we have some projects in the pipeline at the engineer's office that may or may not be good TID projects, but there may be, we have a gap in the North Road project that we'll be working with a developer through assessment on to close the gap between Shanahan and the northern section of North Road that we built up to Peach Blow. The intersection of 23 and Cheshire Road right now has always been planned to shift to the south with a relocated Cheshire Road. That's something we're talking with the city about and trying to facilitate there. There may or may not be a role for the TID in that, but I guess I want to put that out there to our board. If you come across in your discussions and your participation in other areas of government, community activity, of projects that you think ought to be on the radar of our TID board, I think it's time for us to start thinking that way. Not that we can fund a lot of big projects, but we may be able to grab $1 million project and fund it with our board revenues here in fairly short order. And if that is our wish, we need to be doing our work to get those projects ready at the engineer's office. Rob and I need to be working to get those projects facilitated. So that's really the context of this discussion. Are there any other specific projects you wanted to mention, Rob, or?
As you look around, it's not hard to know where the busy areas of the county are, where development's popping. Liberty Township, Orange Township, Berlin Township, Sunbury, certainly the kind of south half of the city of Delaware. and very soon the north half of the city of Delaware. I think there are some projects out there that could certainly use some financial help. I am aware of some Orange Township projects, one in particular, Bale Canyon Road. There's probably $6 or $7 million worth of improvements that are needed to Bale Canyon Road. It's a, if you've been on it, it's not the greatest road for the amount of traffic it's handling, and so there's kind of a systematic approach the townships have been trying to work on to piece together OPWC funding and their own funding to try to upgrade that road. But $7 million is a big figure. That's a lot of money for a township. Liberty Township has some roads, and just it's nothing surprising. Just some of these old county roads that are seeing more traffic. You know, so I think the opportunity for us as TID is to help partner with some of these agencies and help them get those projects across the goal line. You know, whether we do them as standalone TID projects or simply partner with other agencies, I think that's a good use of our resources. But there's also the, as we've talked about before, and I've mentioned before, you know, I think the thing that we need to be looking for in particular are projects that help generate some ongoing income. So the TID isn't solely dependent on county allocations, so we can get some of those return and use the cash we have now to secure ongoing revenue streams. So we can keep rolling those projects out. So we're always keeping an eye open for those. You know, I don't really have anything more to talk about today. But
Well, is there, if we're gonna go ahead and do these type of projects, and we partner with other agencies to do it, like, you know, one avenue the townships have, if there's commercial development around it, is a TIF. And, you know, I think those kind of things should be encouraged if we're gonna try to partner with other agencies. If they have some way they can contribute other funding, like a TIF or whatever, I think that should be encouraged. You know, I mean, we're not sitting here talking about a ranking scale, because I think it's very difficult to come up with a ranking scale. It's more what your office evaluates as the most critical need at the time. So, you know, I think we can rely on that, but I do think we should encourage anybody that's gonna come into it with us, if they have the ability to generate some funds from some other source like a TIF, they should be encouraged to do it.
I think that model is alive and well in the really high-functioning TIDs around the state. There's a handful of TIDs that are doing a lot of really big projects.
Oh, yeah.
And the ongoing TIF revenue, I think in some cases there are JEDs and
Yeah.
other sources that are, that revenues are pledged to the TID in order to facilitate larger projects. So, but you're spot on, Pat, that if we can participate in projects that are going to create ongoing revenue and create the ability to do more projects because of that, that's exactly the kind of thing we ought to be focused on.
I think I mentioned it at the January meeting, but in your packet is the budget to actual report that Mr. Keeley has prepares every month. I included it this month. If you look at the very bottom left cell, you'll see a $2.1 million figure. That's our budgeted estimated general fund carryover at the end of this year. And so that's basically what we have to work with. Those funds are not really allocated for any other purpose other than, I think, you know, next year we'll have our audit expenses, but in general we don't incur any expenses.
Sure.
So.
Not a tough organization to audit.
Right.
I'd like to see the enabling legislation that we work under, just to read through that. That wasn't changed too much in the last days, Mr. Household.
For the TID
For the
board?
TID.
Yeah, I don't believe, I think the last change in the TID statute was the elimination of the optional prevailing wage I don't think there's been, I'm not aware of a change since then.
Okay.
But we can certainly pull those code sections and share that with you,
Yeah.
Tom.
Because if you go back to mission statements, then that's,
Mhm.
and I'm wondering if
Yeah.
air transportation is eventually available.
Good question. I didn't understand your interest in that. Yeah.
Business generally tends to have less cost to the infrastructure of the county as we go forward. And so, you know, shovel-ready plots and that sort of thing, I like this, what we're talking about today is probably is bigger bang for our buck than a residential development that needs a turn lane.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes with the focus of the county to promote industrial and commercial development, to try to modify the tax base on the residential as well.
I think we have, I'm just thinking out loud, but I think we have a strategic interest in economic development and projects that fuel revenue and investment in the county. But I also have a concern, Rob and I have talked about this a lot, that there really are two Delaware counties. You know, the northern part of Delaware County is as rural as most other rural counties in the state, and yet from about the city of Delaware down, we're a urbanizing urban county, and when we compete for grants, when we compete for anything to do with influence or legislation or anything at the state level, the people we talk to see us as the southern part of Delaware County. They don't, that's the stereotype that we have, is that we're this urbanized or urbanizing growing county, and we are, but there's still really some big challenges in the northern part of the county. Our townships there, even with the new gas tax, struggle to maintain their road systems. And there was a pot of money recently for townships to compete directly for funding. So they made applications straight to Odot for a pot of money statewide. And there were a couple really good, I thought, really good projects that came from our rural counties in the northern part of northern townships in the northern part of our county. And we didn't get a project funded out of that. And those projects were just as viable as a project in Marion County that got funded, or in a surrounding county. And so I think we need to make sure that our TID focus isn't exclusively on economic development, that there may be opportunities for us to help in strategic areas in some of the areas of the county that are still more rural. So just wanted to put that out there. I think we suffer a competitive disadvantage in the perception that Delaware County is affluent and has more money than we know what to do with, which isn't the case. But I think at the state level, we have a hard time overcoming that stigma.
Mr. Chair, if I could add to that, the Odot grant program you spoke of was, Odot basically set aside $8 million out of, I think it was the ARP, the Rescue Plan funds that the state received, to allocate to all the townships in the state. And so the thousands of townships throughout the state of Ohio were competing for $8 million. I think there ended up being 40 or 50 grant awards. Delaware County, any township in Delaware County, right off the bat, there was a 100-point scoring scale. The maximum any township in Delaware County could give was 60 points, just because of where they're located, because of the median income in the county and some other economic development excuse me, not development, but economic criteria relating strictly to location. And so, right off the bat, Delaware County was at a, our townships were at a competitive disadvantage just because of the prosperity we have here in Delaware County.
Point well taken.
So, just wanted to share that with you, and there's really no action required in this discussion item, but, just food for thought, all right, something to chew on. All right. Item 9, to entertain a motion to cancel our April 2022 meeting, unless there's something that comes up in the meantime that we'd plug it back in.
So
Move to
moved.
cancel.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And any other business that anyone has to bring before us today? Hearing none. And if I hear no objection to the contrary, I will declare us adjourned.